My husband put divorce papers on our kitchen table on a Tuesday evening in March, looked me straight in the eye without a single trace of guilt, and said, "Sign these right now or I will take the kids from you and you will never see them again." Those were his exact words. Not a request, not a conversation, not even the courtesy of a private moment between two people who had shared 27 years of marriage, 2 children, a mortgage, holidays, hospital rooms, and every ordinary Tuesday just like that one. No, he delivered it like a verdict, like he was the judge and the jury, and I was just some woman who had wandered into his courtroom by accident. And the worst part, the part that still makes my blood turn hot when I think about it, is that he didn't even have the decency to do it alone. She was sitting right there. Tamsin Gale, 37 years old, bright red lipstick, a silk blouse that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and she was sitting in my chair, not the guest chair, not the other side of the table. My chair. The one by the window where I drank my coffee every morning and helped my son Weston with his homework every night. She was sitting in that chair with her legs crossed and her fingers laced together on my kitchen table like she already owned the place, like she had already moved in and I was just the last box that needed to be carried out to the curb. My name is Lorraine Hubbard. I am 51 years old. I have worked as a licensed dental hygienist at the same family dental practice in Knoxville, Tennessee for 24 years. I raised 2 children in this house. My daughter Britt is 19, a college freshman studying elementary education with a heart so big it barely fits inside her. My son Weston is 16, a quiet boy who builds model airplanes in the garage and gives the tightest hugs you have ever felt in your life. I am not a lawyer. I am not a businesswoman. I am not someone who walks into rooms and commands attention. I am the woman who shows up early, stays late, packs lunches at 5:45 in the morning, and never once forgot a single dentist appointment, school play, or basketball game. I am the woman who held this family together with both hands for nearly 3 decades, while my husband, Dominic Hubbard, slowly and deliberately pulled it apart. Dominic is 53. Regional sales director for a pharmaceutical company, the kind of man who can walk into any room and make everyone in it believe he is the most important person there. Tall, well-dressed, confident in a way that used to make me feel proud and now just makes me feel tired. He was charming when I met him, charming when he proposed, charming when he held our babies for the first time, and he was charming right there at that kitchen table when he slid those papers across to me and smiled like he was doing me a favor. "This is Ray Pollard," he said, gesturing to the man sitting beside him, a sharp-looking attorney in a charcoal suit with a leather briefcase open on the table. "He is the best divorce attorney in Knoxville. He has drawn up the terms. I get the house. I get primary custody of Weston. You get weekend visitation and whatever personal items you can fit in your car. That is the deal. Sign it or I will make sure the court hears things about you that will destroy your reputation and your career." I stared at him. I did not blink. I did not flinch. And I did not look at Tamsin, even though I could feel her eyes on me like heat from an open flame. That is when Tamsin leaned forward. She tilted her head to one side the way someone does when they are looking at a stray animal, and she said, "Just take what is offered, sweetheart. Trust me, you will get nothing better than this. A woman like you should be grateful he is giving you weekends. A woman like me." She said that in my house, at my table, in my chair, about my children. And you know what I did? I picked up the pen. I read through every single page slowly, carefully, the way I do everything in my life. And then I signed every page, every line, clean and steady. Dominic leaned back in his chair and let out a breath. He smiled, that big, wide, camera-ready smile that used to make my heart flutter 27 years ago. He looked at Tamsin. She smiled back. They thought it was over. They thought I had just rolled over and handed them my entire life on a silver platter. But here is the thing about quiet women. People mistake our silence for surrender. They think because we are not screaming, we are not fighting. They think because we are not throwing dishes and making scenes, we have accepted defeat. And that is exactly what I needed Dominic to believe. Because while he was busy being charming and cruel and planning his new life with a woman 16 years younger than him, I had spent the last 2 years preparing for this exact night. Every document, every dollar, every legal filing, every single detail, organized and ready, tucked into a counter petition that was clipped right to the back of those divorce papers he was so proud of. Ray Pollard picked up the signed documents. He flipped past my signatures to the attached disclosure packet, and I watched his face change. It did not happen all at once. First his eyes narrowed, then his lips pressed together. Then the color drained from his cheeks so fast it looked like someone had pulled a plug. Dominic noticed. His smile faded. "What?" he said. "What is it?" Ray Pollard looked at me. Then he looked back at Dominic, and in a voice so low it was barely above a whisper, he said, "Sir, you just lost everything." My mother Opal always told me something when I was growing up. She said, "Lorraine, the quietest woman in the room is usually the most dangerous one, not because she is hiding something, but because she has already finished thinking while everyone else is still running their mouths." Mama was a postal worker for 35 years. She raised me and my brother Curtis on her own after my father worked double shifts at the rail yard to keep food on our table. She taught me that strength does not have to be loud. It does not have to make a scene. Sometimes strength is just sitting still and knowing exactly what is coming next while everyone around you has no idea. And that is exactly what happened that Tuesday night in my kitchen. Let me take you back to where it all began, because this story did not start with divorce papers on a table. It started with a man I loved, a life I built, and the slow, painful realization that the person I trusted most in this world had been lying to me for years. I met Dominic Hubbard in the summer of 1996 at a backyard barbecue thrown by a mutual friend in Chattanooga. I was 22 years old, fresh out of dental hygiene school, nervous about starting my first real job, and convinced that life was about to begin in the most wonderful way. He was 24, already working in pharmaceutical sales, and he had the kind of confidence that made you feel like the only person in the room when he looked at you. He walked over to me at that barbecue with a paper plate full of potato salad and said, "I have been trying to think of something clever to say to you for the last 40 minutes, and I have completely failed, so I am just going to introduce myself and hope for the best." I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my lemonade. That was the beginning. We dated for 2 years. He drove from Chattanooga to Knoxville every single weekend just to take me to dinner or sit on my apartment porch and talk until midnight. He met my mother Opal on the third date, brought her flowers, and called her ma'am. He met my brother Curtis and spent an entire afternoon helping him change the transmission on his truck without being asked. He was good. Or at least, he was very, very good at seeming good. And in 1998, when I was 24, and he was 26, we got married at a little church on the edge of town with 60 people in attendance, and my mother crying in the front row. The first years were sweet. We bought a modest 4-bedroom house in West Knoxville with a big backyard and a kitchen that got morning light through the window over the sink. I started working at Crestview Family Dental in 2001, and from the very first week I knew that was where I belonged. I cleaned teeth for families who came back year after year. I watched children grow up in that chair. I knew every patient by name, every medical history by heart, every nervous kid who needed a little extra encouragement before an exam. That job became a second home to me, and in many ways it saved me later when my actual home started falling apart. Britt was born in 2006. She came out screaming and did not stop for 3 straight months, and I loved every exhausted minute of it. Dominic was a good father in those early years. He held her at 2 in the morning when she had colic. He sang to her in a terrible off-key voice that somehow worked every time. And when Weston came along in 2009, quieter than his sister from the very first breath, Dominic cried in the delivery room and told me he could not believe how lucky he was. I believed him. I believed every word that man ever said to me, and that is the part of this story that still stings the most. Things shifted slowly. So slowly that if you were not paying close attention, you would have missed it entirely. Dominic got promoted to regional sales director in 2012, and the travel started. One night a week became 2. 2 became 3. 3 became 4. He started caring about things he never used to care about. New suits every season. a gym membership he used religiously, teeth whitening treatments that he scheduled himself without telling me, which I found out about only because the dentist he went to happened to be a colleague of mine. He started looking in the mirror more and looking at me less. He stopped asking about my day, stopped sitting next to me on the couch in the evenings, stopped reaching for my hand in the car. All those tiny invisible threads that hold a marriage together were being cut one by one, and I could feel it happening, but I could not name it yet. My father passed away in 2018. He had worked the rail yard his entire adult life, and his body gave out the way hardworking bodies do, slowly and then all at once. He left me two things: a small savings account and a duplex rental property on Magnolia Street in East Knoxville that he had owned outright for 20 years. It was not a fortune, but it was his, and he left it to me. And when I held those papers in my hands, I could feel his love in every line of ink on that deed. Dominic came to the funeral. He stood beside me. He shook hands and accepted condolences. But that night, when I sat on the edge of our bed crying so hard I could barely breathe, he patted my shoulder once, said, "You will be fine," and went downstairs to watch television. That was the first time I looked at my husband and saw a stranger. Not a cruel stranger, just an absent one. A man who had already started leaving long before he ever packed a bag, and I said nothing. I wiped my face, pulled the covers up, and lay in the dark, wide awake, wondering when exactly the man I married had disappeared and who this person was that had taken his place. The receipt was the thing that broke it open. It was a cold evening in late 2023, and Dominic had just come home from what he called a 2-day sales conference in Nashville. He dropped his coat on the back of the kitchen chair the way he always did, expecting me to hang it up the way I always did. And I did. But this time, when I picked up that coat, something fell out of the inside pocket. A small folded receipt from a boutique hotel in downtown Nashville. Room service for 2. A bottle of wine that cost more than our electric bill. And it was charged to a credit card I had never seen before. Not our joint card, not his company card. A card I did not know existed, in his name only, with a billing address I did not recognize. I stood in that hallway holding that receipt, and I felt my entire chest go hollow. Not because I was surprised. Somewhere deep inside me, in the part of my gut that had been whispering for months, I already knew. But knowing something in your bones and seeing it printed on a piece of paper are two very different kinds of pain. One is a dull ache you can push aside. The other is a knife. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not march into the living room and throw that receipt in his face the way most people would expect. Instead, I pulled out my phone, took a photograph of both sides, folded it back exactly the way it had been, and slipped it into his coat pocket. Then I hung the coat in the closet and went to finish the dishes. 3 days later, my daughter Britt called me from college. Her voice was strange, tight, careful. "Mom, something came up on the family iPad. Dad is getting messages from someone named Tamsin, and they are not work messages, Mom. They are bad." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to protect her from this. I wanted to tell her it was nothing, a misunderstanding, something innocent. But I could hear in her voice that she had already read enough to know the truth, and lying to my daughter was something I was never willing to do. So I took a breath and said, "Send me the screenshots, baby, every single one, and do not say a word to your father." She did. 14 screenshots. Messages between Dominic and Tamsin Gale that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. Pet names, plans for weekend trips, complaints about me. He called me boring. He called me predictable. He told this woman that I was dead weight holding him back from the life he deserved. My own husband, the father of my children. Typing those words about me to a woman he had known for barely a year while I was at home making his dinner and raising his son. The next morning, I called Jolene Archer. Jolene and I went to college together. She sat behind me in freshman biology, and we became friends the day she lent me her notes after I missed a week with the flu. She went on to become one of the sharpest family law attorneys in Knox County, and she had told me years ago, half joking, "Lorraine, if that husband of yours ever steps out of line, you call me before you call anyone else." I never thought I would need to make that call. But there I was, sitting in a booth at a diner on Chapman Highway, sliding my phone across the table so she could see the screenshots and the hotel receipt. Jolene looked at everything. She did not react emotionally. She did not gasp or shake her head. She simply read it all, set the phone down, and said, "Lorraine, here is what you are going to do. You are not going to confront him. You are not going to cry in front of him. You are not going to give him a single reason to suspect that you know anything. We are going to build a case so solid that when this man walks into a courtroom, he will not have a leg to stand on. Can you do that?" I told her I could, and I meant it. Over the next several months, I became someone I did not know I was capable of being. I tracked every charge on that hidden credit card through our shared banking portal before Dominic changed the password. Hotel rooms in Nashville, Atlanta, and Asheville, jewelry purchases, a designer handbag that cost $2,200, restaurant bills for places I had never been invited to. Every single dollar he spent on Tamsin Gale was a dollar stolen from our family, and I documented all of it. My brother Curtis came over one Saturday afternoon while Dominic was away on another so-called business trip. I told him what was happening. Curtis did not say much. He never does. He just stood up, walked to his truck, came back with empty boxes, and said, "Tell me what needs to go." We packed every important document in the house: financial records, tax returns, the duplex deed, my father's will, insurance policies, bank statements. All of it went to Mama's house, locked in the spare bedroom closet where Dominic would never think to look. Meanwhile, Dominic grew bolder and crueler by the week. He stopped pretending. He criticized everything about me: my hair, my clothes, the way I talked, the food I cooked. One night at dinner, he looked at Weston and said, "Your mother has no ambition. She has been cleaning teeth for 24 years, and she thinks that is a career." Weston put down his fork and stared at his plate. I could see his jaw tighten, his hands ball into fists under the table. Later that night, my boy came to my bedroom with red eyes and a shaking voice and said, "Mom, why are you letting him do this to you?" I held his hands, looked him straight in the eyes, and said, "Because I am not done yet, sweetheart. I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" He nodded, and he did. I sat across from Jolene Archer in her office on a Wednesday afternoon in early 2025, and she spread every document I had gathered across her desk like a general laying out a battle map: bank statements, credit card records, hotel receipts, screenshots of messages, the duplex deed, the trust paperwork, tax returns going back 6 years. She looked at all of it, then she looked at me, and she said something I will never forget. "Lorraine, you have done more investigative work in 18 months than most clients do in 5 years. This man has no idea what is about to hit him." Jolene walked me through everything step by step. First, the duplex on Magnolia Street. My father left it to me when he passed in 2018. It was mine, only mine. And in 2019, on Jolene's advice during a routine estate planning session, I placed that property into a revocable trust solely in my name. Dominic never co-signed a single document related to that duplex. He never contributed a penny toward its maintenance or taxes. He barely even acknowledged it existed because in his mind, a small rental property in East Knoxville was beneath his attention. That was his mistake. Under Tennessee law, inherited property that is kept separate from marital funds remains non-marital. The duplex was untouchable. Every dollar of rental income it had generated over 6 years, deposited into a separate account within the trust, was also untouchable. Dominic could not claim a cent of it. Second, the financial dissipation. Jolene explained that in Tennessee, when one spouse wastes marital funds on an extramarital affair, the court considers that dissipation, and the numbers were devastating. Over the course of his relationship with Tamsin Gale, Dominic had spent $43,000 of marital money on hotels, gifts, restaurants, weekend trips, and a designer wardrobe for a woman who was not his wife. $43,000 that should have gone toward our children's futures, our household, our life. Jolene said, the court is going to look at those numbers and they are going to adjust the asset division accordingly. He is not going to walk away with half. He is going to walk away with significantly less than half because he already spent his share on another woman. Third, custody. Jolene had prepared a petition that documented Dominic's extended absences from the home, his pattern of overnight trips that were not always work-related, his increasing emotional hostility toward me in front of the children, and a written statement from Britt describing what she had witnessed on the family iPad and how her father's behavior had affected her and her brother. Weston was 16, old enough for the court to consider his preference, and Jolene told me that a teenage boy who wanted to stay with his mother carried significant weight with a judge. "Dominic thinks he's going to take your kids," Jolene said. "He's wrong. Everything in this file says those children belong with you." I left her office that day feeling something I had not felt in years. It was not happiness exactly. It was steadiness. Like the ground beneath my feet had finally stopped shifting and I could stand up straight again. That evening I drove to Mama's house. Opal was sitting on her front porch in the wooden rocking chair my father had built for her 30 years ago, a glass of sweet tea sweating in her hand. I sat down beside her and told her everything, not just the legal strategy, but the weight of it, the exhaustion of pretending, the loneliness of sharing a house with a man who had already left in every way that mattered. Mama listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached over and took my hand and said, "Your father left you that property because he knew you would need it someday. He is still looking out for you, baby, and so am I." The following weekend, I sat down with Britt and Weston in the living room while Dominic was away. I did not trash their father. I did not list his sins or ask them to choose sides. I simply said, "Things are going to change soon. I have been working with a lawyer. I have a plan. And no matter what happens next, I need you both to know that we are going to be okay. All three of us." Britt reached over and squeezed my hand. She said, "Mom, we already know. We have known for a while." Weston sat quietly for a moment, staring at his hands, and then he looked up at me with those steady brown eyes and said, "Just tell us when." After that night, something changed in me. I stopped flinching when Dominic made his cruel remarks. I stopped feeling my stomach drop when he came home late without explanation. I stopped caring about his opinions of me entirely because I knew something he did not. I knew exactly how this story was going to end, and all I had to do was wait for him to walk into the trap he had built for himself. It did not take long. Dominic mistook my calmness for defeat. He saw a woman who had stopped fighting, and he assumed she had given up. He told Tamsin I was broken. He told his lawyer I would be easy. He set a date, picked a time, and planned his grand ambush at our kitchen table, fully convinced that he was about to take everything from me. He had no idea that by the time he sat down in that chair, I had already won. It was a Tuesday evening in March. I pulled into the driveway after a full day at the dental office, tired the way I always was, at the end of a long shift, and I noticed 2 extra cars parked in front of my house. One was a black Mercedes I did not recognize. The other was a white BMW convertible that I had seen exactly once before in a photograph Britt had sent me from the company holiday party Dominic had attended without me. I knew whose car that was. I sat in my own driveway for 10 seconds, both hands on the steering wheel, and I took one long breath. Then I walked inside. They were all sitting at my kitchen table like they owned the place. Dominic was at the head, wearing the navy blazer he always wore when he wanted to look important. To his left sat Ray Pollard, a sharp-faced man in a charcoal suit with a leather briefcase open on the table and a stack of papers arranged neatly in front of him. And to Dominic's right, sitting in my chair by the window, was Tamsin Gale. Red lipstick, silk blouse, legs crossed, a look on her face that I can only describe as amusement, like she had come to watch a show and she already knew how it ended. Dominic did not stand up when I walked in. He did not greet me. He just pointed at the empty chair across from him and said, "Sit down, Lorraine." I sat. He slid a thick envelope across the table. "These are divorce papers. My attorney has drawn up the terms, and they are very simple. I keep the house. I get primary custody of Weston. You get weekend visitation and whatever personal belongings you can pack into your car. If you fight this, I will drag your name through every courtroom in Knox County until you cannot show your face at that little dental office of yours without people whispering behind your back." He leaned forward. "Sign the papers. Walk away clean. This is the best deal you are ever going to get." I looked at him. I looked at Ray Pollard, who was watching me with the calm, practiced expression of a man who had delivered this kind of ultimatum 100 times before. And then I looked at Tamsin, who tilted her head to one side and said, "Just take it, sweetheart. A woman like you should be grateful he is even offering weekends." A woman like me. Those 4 words hung in the air of my own kitchen like smoke. She said that in my house, about my children, while sitting in my chair. I reached for the envelope. I opened it slowly. I read every single page while the 3 of them sat in silence, waiting. Dominic tapped his fingers on the table. Tamsin examined her nails. Ray Pollard checked his watch. They thought I was stalling. They thought I was looking for a way out. I was not. I was making sure everything was exactly as Jolene and I had expected. And it was. I picked up the pen from the center of the table, and I signed. Every page, every line, clean, steady, and without a single tear. Dominic exhaled, a slow, satisfied breath. He leaned back in his chair and smiled that wide, bright smile that had fooled me for 27 years. He looked at Tamsin, and she smiled back. Victory. That is what they thought this was. Then Ray Pollard picked up the signed documents. He began reviewing them the way attorneys do, flipping through each page to verify signatures and initials. And then he reached the back of the packet where I had clipped my own set of documents, the counter petition, the trust disclosures, the financial records, the credit card statements, the screenshots, the custody filing. Every single piece of evidence I had spent 2 years gathering, organized and attached, and waiting for this exact moment. I watched his face. First his eyes stopped moving, then his jaw tightened. Then the color left his cheeks so fast he looked like a man who had just received terrible news from a doctor. He set the papers down on the table and stared at them for a long moment without speaking. Dominic noticed. His smile disappeared. "What is it?" he said. "What are you looking at?" Ray Pollard did not answer immediately. He flipped another page, then another. I could see his hands were not quite steady. Finally, he looked up, not at Dominic, at me. And I saw something in his eyes that I had never expected to see from a man like him. Respect. Then he turned to Dominic and spoke in a voice so low it was barely above a whisper. "The duplex on Magnolia Street is held in a trust, her trust. It is non-marital property under Tennessee law. None of it is divisible. The rental income generated over the past 6 years is also in the trust. You have no claim to any of it." Dominic blinked. "So what? We still have this house." Pollard was not finished. "There is a counter filing attached. She is claiming financial dissipation, $43,000 in marital funds spent on your relationship with Ms. Gale. Hotels, jewelry, gifts, restaurants, every charge documented with dates, amounts, and corresponding credit card statements." He paused. "You told me there were no extramarital expenditures, Dominic. You told me the trust did not exist. I asked you directly, and you told me there was nothing to worry about." Dominic's face went red. His hands gripped the edge of the table. "This is a setup. She planned this." Pollard set the papers down with a finality that made the whole room go still. "There is also a custody petition supported by documented evidence of extended absences, verbal hostility toward your wife in the presence of your minor child, and a written statement from your adult daughter. Sir, I cannot represent a client who has misled me about material facts. I am withdrawing from this case." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. Tamsin stood up. Her smirk was gone. Her face was pale and confused, like she had walked into a movie halfway through and suddenly realized she was not the hero. "Dominic, what is he talking about? You said this was handled. You said she had nothing." Dominic slammed his hand on the table. "Shut up, Tamsin." I stood, slowly. I picked up my purse from the counter. I looked at Dominic, and for the first time in 2 years, I let him see exactly who I was. Not the quiet wife, not the broken woman, not the dead weight he had described in his text messages to his mistress. I let him see the woman who had outthought him, outplanned him, and outlasted him without raising her voice a single time. "You spent 27 years underestimating me, Dominic," I said, "and it cost you everything." I walked toward the door. I paused and looked back at Tamsin, who was standing frozen beside the table with her arms crossed and her eyes wide. "And Tamsin, you are still sitting in my chair, but you can keep it. I will not be needing it anymore." I walked out of that house and I did not look back. The 48 hours after I walked out of that kitchen were the quietest of my entire life. I drove straight to Mama's house that Tuesday night, walked through her front door without saying a word, and sat down on her couch. Opal took one look at my face and went to the kitchen to make coffee. She did not ask me what happened. She just set the cup in front of me, sat down beside me, and waited. When I finally told her everything, every detail from the moment I walked through my own front door to the moment I walked out of it for the last time, she closed her eyes and nodded slowly. Then she said, "Your father would have been so proud of you tonight, Lorraine, and so am I." Ray Pollard formally withdrew from Dominic's case within 2 days. He filed the paperwork citing client misrepresentation of material facts, which in plain language meant that Dominic had lied to his own attorney about the trust, the duplex, and the money he had spent on Tamsin. In the legal world, that is not just embarrassing. That is the kind of thing that makes a lawyer walk away from a paying client without looking back, because his own professional license matters more than any retainer check. Dominic scrambled to find a new attorney. He called 4 firms in Knoxville. Every single one of them either already knew about the case through the courthouse grapevine or took one look at the evidence Jolene had compiled and politely declined to take him on. He ended up with a young attorney fresh out of law school who did his best but was hopelessly outmatched. The court. Proceedings moved faster than I expected. Jolene presented everything cleanly and methodically. The duplex and the trust were ruled non-marital property. The rental income was confirmed as separate. The judge reviewed the financial dissipation evidence, $43,000 in documented spending on hotels, gifts, jewelry, restaurants, and trips for Tamsin Gale, and adjusted the division of marital assets accordingly. The family home was ordered to be sold and the proceeds divided, but Dominic's share was reduced significantly to account for the money he had already wasted on his affair. In the end, the man who told me I would get nothing walked away with far less than he ever imagined possible. Custody was not even a close fight. The court reviewed Dominic's pattern of extended absences, his documented hostility toward me in the presence of our minor son, and Britt's written statement describing how her father's behavior had affected the family. Weston, at 16, told the court plainly and quietly that he wanted to live with his mother. The judge granted me primary custody. Dominic received standard visitation every other weekend. He was also ordered to pay child support and a portion of my legal fees. Tamsin Gale left Dominic within 2 months. It turns out that a man who loses his house, his family, and a significant chunk of his income is far less attractive than a man who flashes a company credit card at expensive restaurants. She transferred to a different division of the pharmaceutical company, and from what I heard through mutual acquaintances, never spoke to him again. Dominic moved into a 1-bedroom apartment on the south side of town. His company, after learning about the financial misconduct documented in the court filings, quietly let him go during a corporate restructuring. No severance, no farewell party, just a box on his desk and a security escort to the parking lot. He called me once, about 4 months after the divorce was finalized. It was late on a Sunday night. His voice was flat and tired and nothing like the man who had sat at my kitchen table with a smirk on his face and a mistress at his side. He said, "I did not think you had it in you, Lorraine." I held the phone against my ear and let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, "That was always your biggest mistake, Dominic." And I hung up. I moved into one unit of the duplex on Magnolia Street with Weston. We painted the walls together on a Saturday afternoon, arguing over colors until we compromised on a warm sage green for the living room and a soft blue for his bedroom. I rented the other unit to a young couple with a baby, and the income from that lease, combined with my salary at Crestview Dental, gave us everything we needed. Not luxury, not excess, just enough. Just steady, just ours. Britt comes home from college every chance she gets. She walks through the front door of the duplex like she has lived there her whole life, kicks off her shoes, and heads straight for the kitchen to see what I'm cooking. Weston is thriving. His grades came up. He started smiling more. He joined the Model Aviation Club at school and built a replica of a 1942 Spitfire that now sits on the shelf above his desk. The anger he carried in his shoulders for so long has started to soften, and some nights I hear him laughing on the phone with friends, and it sounds like music. Mama comes for dinner every Sunday, same as always. She sits at the head of the table now in a chair that is hers and hers alone, and she says grace the same way she has said it for 50 years. One Sunday evening, she looked around the table at me, Britt, Weston, and Curtis, who had started joining us every week, and she said, "This is what your father wanted for you, Lorraine. A table full of people who love you, and not a single one of them who does not deserve to be here." I had to set my fork down because I could not see through the tears. I still work at Crestview Family Dental. I still show up early. I still know every patient by name. And when I drive home in the evening to my little duplex on Magnolia Street, I park in my own driveway and I walk through my own front door and I sit in my own chair. Nobody else's, mine. People ask me sometimes how I did it, how I stayed quiet for 2 years while my husband tore our marriage apart, how I kept my composure that night at the kitchen table with his mistress sitting 3 feet away from me laughing in my face. And I tell them the same thing every time. I tell them what my mother told me when I was just a girl growing up in Knoxville with nothing but good manners and a strong backbone. The quietest woman in the room is usually the most dangerous one, not because she is hiding anything, but because she already finished the fight while everyone else was still talking. If this story touched something inside you, if you have ever been told you would get nothing, if you have ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better, then I am asking you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story today, because I promise you, there is someone in your life right now going through something like this, and they need to know they are not alone. Drop a comment below and tell me your story. I read every single one of them, and they mean more to me than you will ever know. And if you have not already, subscribe to this channel and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a story. This is a family here, and you are part of it now. I am Buddy, and I will see you in the next one.